Philosophical conversation with Kevin and David. Philosophical conversation. Philosophical conversations with Kevin and David. Philosophical conversations.
Welcome to our show, Kevin and David, Philosophical Conversations for all the nations, not on no stupid radio stations. We're broadcasting to the interwebs. Say what's up, Kevin.
What's up, Kevin?
No, say what's up to the interwebs.
What's up, interwebs?
Interwebs seems like they're really happy to see you, man.
Yeah, I can see it on all their faces.
They're chubby little faces.
Listen, they're sensitive about that.
They love it.
Quit flirting with the interwebs. Let's get to it.
The interwebs love you, Kevin. What are we talking about today, Kevin?
We are talking about the choice to go vegan.
Why should you go vegan? That's the question.
It's the main question. It's our heartfelt suggestion. It's the best way to avoid indigestion, morally.
Well, in this session, me and my homeboy, we are going to tell you exactly why we went vegan and why we think you should go vegan too. So, Kevin, start us out. What happened, man? Why did you decide to go vegan? Kevin Hoflerbach, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Initially, my choice to experiment with vegetarianism and ultimately veganism was a health one. I was really into hunting and fishing and stuff like that all through my teen years. I thought it was cool. I hated vegetables, pretty much any and all vegetable for like about 20 years. My first voluntary salad, I was almost 21 years old. I took a health class at the college I was going to, and I was already thinking about it a little bit, but I met someone in class who talked about vegetarianism and being a vegan, and it got me thinking. So I tried vegetarianism for a while based on health reasons, because I thought it might be a better choice, and eventually, after going back to eating everything, I cut cow, then pig, and then poultry out of my diet, and eventually eggs and fish.
I remember early in our relationship, you were definitely cooking steak. You know me, I was a meat lover, and get the meat lover's pizza.
Yeah, I remember all the raps about chicken that you would make, sometimes taunting me.
Chicken.
I decided to make the plunge into veganism a little bit before you. Not much before, but right. Before. I guess initially I made the choice to go vegan for health reasons, and then after that it allowed me the distance philosophically to start questioning some of the other choices and the reasons, and I decided I didn't want to pay other people to kill things for me, and I wasn't willing to kill animals myself just for my own tastes. And then that kind of branched out the more I looked into the ethics of it, into questions of the impact on the planet and on other people. So it mainly became an issue of dealing with suffering on local and larger scales. But the health thing, I definitely benefited from better health. I lost about 10 or 15 pounds right off the bat, and I never gained it back. And I've felt really good since I made the switch. But beyond that, it's more of a choice so that I can feel good emotionally about my decisions as well. I mean, I think that eating is one of the most fundamental things that we can do, and what we put in our body is one of the most basic decisions that we can make. That's why I have been vegan for probably 9 years in May.
Wow, man. It's a long time. Let's start with health reasons. What are some of the health reasons that you were initially thinking about and concerned with when you first went veg and vegan?
Initially, when I went veg and vegan, the issue, it was a little bit of a different time. I don't think we had as much access to stuff like the China study and some of the other information, but it was starting to gain some speed there.
It basically links cancer growth to a certain amount of, like, basically like overdosing on animal protein. Would you say that's like a brief summary of what that's about?
Yeah. So what was the main concern at the time was animal proteins in some respect, but it was mainly like the animal fats and the saturated animal fats, and the propensity of them to cause heart disease and just to make you generally less healthy. They were starting to uncover some links between meat and cancer at the time, but it wasn't the information about it wasn't as nearly as robust as it is now. I mean, I always knew that vegetables were healthy, and it was probably a healthier choice to make a switch to a primarily vegetable-based diet. But it wasn't until I took the health class that I started looking at some of those connections a little bit more thoroughly. It was pretty convincing the more that I studied it. I did a couple of projects specifically about the impact of milk on the body, about how even though they claim that it's a great source of calcium, the calcium in milk is really poorly absorbed by our body. I don't think people are supposed to drink cow's milk. I think that there's a reason that half the planet, at least half the planet, it shows signs of being allergic to it, and 70% of the planet has some form of lactose intolerance or another. You might argue that, well, we're still evolving. That is just an ongoing process, but I'd say, why would we want that to be something that's included in our societal makeup and our evolution? We are, as is said oftentimes, the only animals that drink another animal's milk, the only animals that drink milk after our infancy. It's ludicrous get out the way. That we look at people like they're crazy if they consider drinking breast milk. You know, you have a kid who drinks breast milk past the age of 5, and it's scandalous. That's disgusting. That's terrible. You know, what are you doing, you terrible fucking parent? But if you drink the fucking breast excretions of a 700 to 1,100 pound animal, that's perfectly normal.
Yeah, we've got it all backwards there, don't we?
We do, and if you think about drinking the milk of some other animal besides a cow or a goat, you're also a lunatic in our culture. It's like the religion of your own culture. When you have the distance of another culture, you're like, oh, a four-armed, elephant god? That's silly. That's crazy. You guys, circumcise or sacrifice these people or things or whatever, but you ignore the insanity of your own culture because you're inculcated into it very, very young, so that it seems natural and wholesome. But the natural wholesomeness of it is wholly manufactured and conditioned. You wouldn't drink a pig's milk. If they were selling pig's milk at the supermarket, it would be a national news story. People wouldn't stand for it. If you were selling horse milk, unless it was really dire circumstances, people would kick up such a huge fuss that company would be shut down, and those people would be run out of town. Dog milk? So, man? Oh yeah, dog milk? No fucking way. Possum milk, squirrel milk, cat milk.
Come on, man! I got a bunch of these dogs out back, strapped up in little cages with a bunch of little, sucklers on their little nipples. I've got a little factory out there.
That person might be lynched. That person, if they caught him, would be put in jail and might be killed because
you're abusing those dogs. That's not cool.
And we jealously defend our idiosyncrasies and advertise the hell out of them to the point where we are really defensive of the normalcy of cow's milk because it's just become this uncritically assumed part of our culture. Oh, of course it's wholesome. Well, it's not wholesome, actually. It leads to other health problems. It probably increases your chance of colorectal cancer, mucus, sinus infections, the pus, the nasty stuff that they do in terms of the factory farms, all the preemptive antibiotics. Over 50%, like 60% of the antibiotics that we use in this country are preemptively used. They're prophylactically used in factory farms, most of which are dairy farms. So we have growth hormones and antibiotics in our food supply.
That's why they say that girls are getting their periods younger and stuff like that.
That's a big part of it, the BGH. In some states, they actually were requiring them to label whether or not it has BGH in it, and the milk lobby is so effective that got shut down immediately. And when other companies tried to say, well, we don't use BGH, the milk lobby effectively made them remove that from their milk cartons. It said, well, there's nothing wrong with it, so you can't tell people whether yours has it in there or not. So you can't brag about the fact that you don't use BGH because we are really sensitive about it. And that's what a lot of this comes down to, is the sensitivity and the jealousness of our own customs practices and profit. And we've gotten to the point where we don't see the plank in our own eye, and we're pointing out all the splinters in everybody else's. We call people crazy for eating cats and dogs, but pigs are smarter on average than almost every cat or dog. They can form loving relationships, all those things. They can experience pain and pleasure, emotional attachment, things like that. But we won't hear any of that because it's not our custom. It seems barbaric because we've co-evolved with dogs, we've co-evolved with cats, but we've domesticated pigs, and people keep pigs as pets. We just don't have them as our mascot. And
unless you live in Arkansas. Another thing is about going back to the milk situation. Their slogan used to be, "Milk does a body good."
After these messages, we'll be right back.
I know I should drink milk, because it'll help me grow up big and strong. Milk! It does the body good!
And they had to change it legally because it doesn't do a body good. And then they changed it to the whole got milk thing. Remember that?
yeah,
And that was huge. Like they did like really well off of that campaign. I guess that was like one of the best ad campaigns in a long time. And you know, if there was any kind of a scandal related to the whole like them having to change their name thing, it seems like that got kind of swept under the rug.
Sure. And it's not that they don't still make health claims about milk. They still certainly do. That never stopped. They had to adjust it a little bit, but it never stopped. They have, I mean, I remember LeBron James about 3 or 4 years ago, Eva Longoria, Mariska Hargitay, all these people with their Got Milk campaign, and then the sly health claims about calcium and about protein. Just before we got on this call, there was a commercial that had 2 people ballroom dancing, and it was making a big to-do over what does 8 grams of protein look like.
What 8 grams of protein looks like? When you prove you're only as old as you feel.
Well, it looks like a glass of milk. They still are pounding on these health claims, even though they have changed their slogan. They're still making a big to-do over how good it is for you, and if you have the gall to question that, they will come after you. They are an incredibly, incredibly powerful lobby.
That's the thing. It's like in the kind of capitalistic democracy where the market decides what's true and what's good, and money is speech and all that kind of stuff. If you're one of these big companies, it seems like you can almost either change or hide the truth. That's just an amazing factor that I think helps keep people so ignorant to all the problems that we do have with these things.
Not only ignorant, but resentful of those who would point out both the fallacious claims and the fact that our system is so fucked that that is how we do business. So if you point out just how powerful these lobbies are that can sue Oprah. Oprah famously said when the mad cow scandal happened that she wasn't going to have another burger again. Nothing besides that. That was the grounds for her being sued by the American Cattle Farmers Association.
Wow. They can do that just because she said she wasn't going to have a burger again?
She won, but only because it's Oprah and she can afford millions of dollars for legal counsel. They will.
They probably wouldn't come after you or me for saying that we're not going to have a burger again.
Right, but say you're someone like Abby Martin on Breaking the Set or something, or Joe Rogan, or someone who has a bit of a mouthpiece and they're able to say something about stuff, and maybe they have a viewership of 100,000 people. They will totally go after you for making these claims if they feel it's in their best interest to shut your voice down. And that is the type of culture that we live in, where we'll litigate in order to squash dissent, and money equals speech. But back to the point of milk not being good for you. They're trying to do damage control because more and more people are realizing that dairy isn't nearly as good for you as they've been led to believe. And now they're starting to realize that dairy is actually bad for you. But whether or not that's going to continue to gain ground depends in large part about the discourse that takes place over the next couple of years. But the facts are pretty clear in terms of us. There are plenty of other animals that eat meat, and you can debate whether or not human beings should be one of these animals, which we'll go on to do. But no other animal drinks another animal's milk. No animal drinks milk after its infancy. We have culturally cultivated this practice and continued it to the point where it's become a monolithic part of our society and our food supply. It occupies almost its own large part of the food pyramid. Subsidized by our government and endorsed by the FDA and the USDA. We are led to believe that milk is a healthy part of a balanced diet, when in reality it is likely causing crazy amounts of changes to our body through the illegitimate farm practices of bovine growth hormones, of antibiotics, which is very likely going to end up giving us a antibiotic-resistant bacteria that will be huge in the future. But even the most sustainable farm practices, I wouldn't drink milk. I'm allergic personally to it, but I wouldn't drink milk if I wasn't allergic to it, even if it came from the quaintest local farm where their cows were also pets. To me, it's a repugnant practice. I'm glad that I had the distance of being allergic to it in order to see it as such, but over and above that, it's a poor source of calcium. You can get better sources of protein. I find it to be gross and unsustainable. And the fact that dairy is so ubiquitous in our diet, both in terms of the things that it's made out of, or we make out of it, cheese and whatnot, but also the fact that you are hard-pressed to find a product that doesn't have some form of milk in it.
As a vegan, I know, like, I go to the store, I'm like, barbecue chips. What's this? Oh, it's got milk in it. Oh, what's this? Peanut butter. Oh, it's got milk in it. Oh, what's this? It's just like you go down the list, you go down the aisles, and you find all kinds of things that you wouldn't think should have any kind of milk in it, and you can't get it. Okay, like
Pesto?
Pesto. Yeah, you can't just get pesto. And you would think why? Or like wine. Like why? But it is interesting, like how much stuff culturally just uses animal byproducts. I think maybe it has something to do with the whole, like, people trying to be responsible with all the parts of the animal or something like that. And so they're just like putting dead animal bits into everything, so that way they can feel responsible about using it all or something.
Yeah, true. Actually, the Cracked podcast goes into that in some pretty good detail about how the food industry manipulates you. They found that they had all this excess milk fat, so they started augmenting all these products with milk fat in order to get rid of this supply and pushing it on a large scale, despite the fact that it's really bad for humans. But yeah, a lot of it is these extra things and the laziness of people to find some other better solution. The idea of eating meat and that being a source of cholesterol, and cholesterol being one of the main issues as it relates to heart disease, and the fact that food-related, lifestyle choice-related disease is one of the biggest killers in our country, over and above car crashes and anything else. Heart disease is just a dramatic killer. Heart disease and cancer are two of the biggest killers of human beings. And besides that, they're preventable.
It's kind of crazy, to see in our country how many people are starving around the world, and here we're actually like getting really fat. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's more of a moral concern, but it seems like maybe there's some crossover there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that we'll discuss issues of exploitation and deforestation, things like that a little bit later on. But cholesterol is only found in animals. You can have some naturally produced cholesterol in your own system, but the only external source of cholesterol is meat. It's animal products, meat and dairy.
And the thing that people always say is like, oh, you're not going to get enough protein. It's like, well, that's not really how the body works anyways. The body creates its own proteins out of amino acids, and it actually has to work harder to break down those animal proteins than it does the plant-based proteins. And so your body actually winds up doing a lot more work to get the protein. Plus, it seems like amino acids and proteins are in basically everything. So it's kind of the main thing that you always hear about, protein, pretty off base.
Right, and what they're talking about when they say a complete protein, it means that you have the right combination of essential amino acids necessary to create the proteins in your body. And you can get those essential amino acids in a number of different ways. A lot of people want to say that you can't get essential amino acids in the right combinations in plant products, but that's not true. There are certain ones that have it, but it's in combination anyway. So if you eat beans and rice combine with the right amino acids in order to form a complete protein. Your body's not going to say, hey, these are beans and rice. You're going to give it to me in one thing or nothing. No, your body takes those things after you chew it up and digest it, and converts those into new proteins inside of your body. What your body has to do otherwise is to break those proteins down in order to extract those amino acids. That the whole life of the cow, all of that energy inefficiently was creating a concentrated form of protein, but your body still has to break that protein down, and it could do it in much more efficient ways, both for your body and for the ecosystem.
Isn't it interesting how we literally are made physically of the stuff that we eat, how we put it in our body? It goes through this hole and out the other one, but somewhere in the middle, some kind of magic happens where it breaks everything down to its essential bits and then rebuilds it. That is amazing. But along with that is this idea of, well, you want to put good fuel in your car, right? You get a really nice car, you want to take care of it. You put like the premium grade fuel in there because you want to take care of it. We only get one body, so it seems to me that you would want to put the best fuel in it that you can, that you'd want to take the best care of it that you can. Speaking economically, out there in the marketplace right now, there's all kinds of really cheap, nasty shit out there, like D-grade meat, like on every corner. The food environment that we have around us is not even high quality of meat. And the options that are available out there are, for the most part, pretty gross, not necessarily something that you would want to put in your body and have it become you. Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can replace our cars, but we really can't replace our bodies, at least not yet. So the fact that we have the subsidization of meat to the point where you have really lax regulations on what can be served. You have this ammoniated meat served by these fast food restaurants, the pink slime that goes into these chicken nuggets and whatnot. It's the way that they extract these things, the way that we really don't have a whole lot of oversight in terms of nutritional value, and we've been brainwashed to the point where people very seldom seem to care what it is that they eat, as long as it is salty, fatty, savory enough, and it fills them up long enough to get to the next moment. You have these KFC commercials that will say, oh, we brought home real dinner this time.
Really? Again?
Give them something special. Gather around the world's best chicken and home-style sides for a dinner everyone will get excited about.
But you will never hear a KFC commercial talk about its nutritional value, because its nutritional value, I mean, it's a huge amount of saturated fats, more saturated fats than you should probably consume in a day. You have bleached flour in the breading. You have all sorts of things that are just not healthy for you, but were marketed to in such a way that health is given a very, very short shrift. And if anybody brings up either health or environmental impact, they're accused of either spoiling the party or encroaching upon the freedoms of people to put in their body whatever they want. America's great for the freedom to put in your body whatever you want, but that's certainly not the fucking case. You can't go and smoke a joint, which is certainly not as bad for you as a KFC extra tasty crispy bucket.
Like you're mentioning, like bleached flour and like the pink slime and all this stuff. Even like the milk, like acceptable levels of blood and pus, and the homogenization and pasteurization process that does go through. By the time that the regular consumer gets the regular milk in cartons and stuff that they're used to, if there was anything good in there, it's long dead now.
Yeah. I mean, the process that we have to make things shelf stable, all the crappy things that we put in the store in order to make it more economically viable to make profit for the corporations. It's no coincidence that Philip Morris bought Kraft and that they have an artificial flavoring factory that supersedes their regular flavoring factory. Anything that they can make artificially out of a chemical saves them money. And if they can trick us into buying things that are much cheaper on their end to make and much more shelf stable, you look at the foods that are subsidized in this country, and it is the crops that have been really, really stepped on and processed to an insane degree. And then you buy a big bag of Doritos that is well cheaper than a similar serving of broccoli that would supply the same amount of calories. Yeah, you can buy three cheeseburgers for $3, whereas you're not going to find that same sort of subsidization when it relates to produce. Fresh produce. It's less shelf stable. It is not as readily marketable and able to be kept in storehouses for long periods of time. So that economic viability undercuts the potential for profit in the eyes of the corporations that want to market it. So they, of course, push the Doritos and the Cheetos and all the things that can survive on a shelf for 3 years rather than something that would actually have some sort of nutritive value.
I think it's obvious, like, you see these cancer and heart disease doctors that when these people have cancer, they immediately put them on a minimally processed plant-based diet. That's what they do. And, if you have a massive heart attack like Bill Clinton, he had like a double or triple bypass. He's been vegan ever since. It is prescribed a huge amount for these people that have either cancer or heart disease or diabetes, the three biggest killers in our country. And that's because it works, because it actually has the effect of being good for you and allowing your body to repair itself, repair the damage of years of eating shitty processed food that, is meat and other things that are just bad for you. We can talk to the idea of evolutionary arguments and the potential argument that the readily available protein gains that primates on the tundra had allowed us to develop a bigger brain case and start walking upright and things like that. Sugars in the form of fruit allowed us to evolve in certain ways, and our brains tell us sweet is good because those calorie-dense foods were scarce. But we're at a point where calories aren't scarce. 2/3 of Americans are fucking unhealthy. We are massively, massively overweight on a national scale. And the fact is that the first step towards fixing that is getting a right diet, and a right diet that includes primarily plant-based nutrition. And I would argue if primarily plant-based nutrition is healthy, then all plant-based nutrition is going to be even healthier. Some people say, oh, meatless Mondays, or I only eat meat as a treat. Well, why? Why dabble in suffering and dabble in unhealthiness? Go drink a beer, go smoke a fucking joint if you want to dabble in unhealthiness for pleasure. It's going to be far less of an impact on your body and on the overall.
Smoking joints are unhealthy, man.
You can't say that, dude.
Don't say that.
But
I don't like that. I'm changing the channel now. Fuck this conversation with Kevin and David.
You judgmental assholes. But, the fact of the matter is that...
You smoke those joints, says David. I don't know what this Kevin guy is talking about, but it's good for you.
But the fact of the matter is that doctors know that plant-based nutrition is where it's at. The more severe the illness, the more severe the illness, the more severe the solution. And the solution, when you look at it, isn't that severe. Switch to a healthier diet based on plants. It's better for you, it's better for the environment, and it's better for the animals. I have a close friend who has essentially cured her thyroid disease through plant-based diet. She went on a plant-based diet about a year ago, and she just recently went back to her doctor, and her doctor said, you show no signs of your thyroid disease. What did you do differently? And she said, well, I am plant-based now. I eat a vegan diet. And he's like, well, that's what I was going to suggest that you do, but it looks like you've already done that, and it's working really well. You can go back to eating pretty much whatever, but I'd suggest that you stay vegan. And she's like, oh, I definitely will. But I mean, it was severe. She was on thyroid medication daily, probably twice a day, and had to worry about developing thyroid cancer. There was a very real potential of developing thyroid cancer. But she has been off of her medication for months due to the fact that through a plant-based diet she was able to correct those problems and get healthy. And your body, I'm not one of those people that says, your body has everything it ever needs to be healthy and modern medicine has nothing to offer us. I think that's a fallacious position, but I do think many of our ills are caused by our diet, and if we go back to a diet that's healthier, our bodies will correct for those imbalances and those problems.
I think that's right. Have you seen Forks Over Knives?
Yeah, I made my parents watch it too.
Yeah, that's a good one. When I first heard about it, I thought that it was saying, like, forks over knives, like, eat with forks, not knives. Then I realized that it was saying the better thing to do is to change your diet so that way you don't have to get cut open to have a bypass.
This could be the first generation of children in the United States that lives less than its parents.
I got 2 pills I take for my diabetes, then I got 1 for cholesterol, high blood pressure, and then I take Byetta, which is an injectable.
I'm getting really shaky and I'm sick and I'm fatigued, and that's when they diagnosed me with hypertension and diabetes.
Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure cost this country more than $120 billion each year.
People are saying, you're crazy, you're a cancer patient, you should be resting. Doctors told me this. When I had the second heart attack, the doctor said I should prepare for death.
Heart disease is an absolutely toothless paper tiger that need never ever exist.
People who were raised in Japan, the Philippines, Korea, China, never had heart disease, prostate cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis.
This is the atlas of cancer mortality in China.
Virtually, the Western diet was non-existent. They had no animal products. They had no dairy, no meat.
We learned that we could turn on and turn off cancer growth just by adjusting the level of intake of that protein.
I knew at that point what caused most diseases.
Our national authorities are simply excluding this concept in order to protect the status quo.
With the Western diet, there are going to be 500,000 people in this country this year who will have to have the front half of their body divided, their heart exposed. Some people would call that extreme.
I know of nothing else in medicine that can come close to what a plant-based diet can do.
If you go through life thinking that what happens to you from a health perspective is based on your genes, you're a helpless victim.
I reversed the diabetes. The diabetes is not coming back.
I just can't understand what it's done to change my life.
Diet is so much more important than anybody ever thought.
To me, the answer is so simple, it's criminal. And it's just people starting to take responsibility for their health and starting to eat more plant-based foods. It's that simple.
It's a great movie because not only does it have the scientific side with Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who's the guy who does the China study, which is one of the biggest studies on meat or animal protein and cancer. And another guy, I forget his name, which is my bad. I'll probably put it right here. This guy, he's a medical doctor, and he has patients that he works with who are having major problems, and he puts them on a plant-based diet and gives them some probably exercises and stuff like that, and helps to rehabilitate them. And so you have the scientific side, and then the actual working with people to make a difference side, and it really does gives you a good picture of the health-related consequences of a meat diet and the benefits of a plant-based diet. Sometimes I hear people say that if you're vegan, it's unhealthy because you have to take supplements, you don't get everything that you need, like B12 and zinc and stuff like that. What do you have to say about that, Kevin?
A lot of people talk about the essential amino acids, like the omega-3s that you have to get from fish, but you don't have to get it from fish. In fact, many of the things that people supplement in order to get, they can get from the thing the animal eats. So instead of eating tons of fish that have concentrated all the omega-3s of the DHA-containing algae. You could instead eat the algae that the fish eat and concentrate it in some other form, or eat flax or chia. Chia has really crazy amount, like a gram of ALA, which your body, if it's fairly healthy, can readily convert into DHA and EPA, which are the amino acids that we are after when we eat fish. So you can do something like that and get the omega-3s that way and swallow oil, but regular meat eaters supplement all the time. They take vitamins, they take fish oil capsules, they take plenty of those things. So you can supplement as a vegetarian or a vegan. You can do that to get your B12 or your D, but you can also very often get it from some kind of food source. But I'm one that doesn't feel like that's an incredibly good argument anyway. I don't think that supplementation is that extreme compared to all the things that we do in order to put meat on the plate. Antibiotics, the bovine growth hormones, all these things are also unnatural and much less efficient, much more onerous in their application than getting a B12 pill or a multivitamin that you take, once every other day.
I wasn't so much concerned with the health reasons. To me, like my life is my own. I'm kind of like some of these people who say, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, then maybe it's not any of their business. In general, I guess I just haven't been used to worrying about that. Maybe as I get older, it'll be more of a concern for me. But I think one of the things that was initially convincing to me were a lot of these moral arguments and finding out about what goes on in a lot of these factory farms and just considering the cost of what I was taking for granted, and also realizing that veganism and vegetarianism was really a viable option. Because if you start just thinking about like the basics of like what a moral argument is getting at, it probably has something to do with the well-being of conscious creatures, right? Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it just seems like, okay, well, is it okay to harm something? And, in some cases, you have to say yes. Yes, like you should. Maybe there are certain situations where you should harm somebody, like if somebody is like trying to kill you or something like that. Like maybe you could fight back in self-defense, and that's like the good thing to do. Or if you're like, desperate to survive or something like that, there might not be options around and you might have to kill to survive or something like that. But it seems to me that what is good, what that means is to try to avoid unnecessary suffering, whatever that might be. That's kind of a vague, broad outline, like kind of with broad strokes. But if it can be made into very practical things, like if I put a chicken stir fry in front of you over here and a vegan stir fry over here with a chicken substitute, and you know that to have this one, that you have to kill a chicken, and you can kind of keep that in your head, and you have to be like, okay, well, right now I'm faced with this choice. Do I want to kill this chicken to have this chicken stir fry, or would I rather have this vegetable stir fry? And it seems to me that pretty much any time you're given this choice, it's always going to be better to take the vegetarian stir fry, because if you know that the vegetarian stir fry or the vegan stir fry is going to give you the same thing, the same energy, the same delicious taste, the same basic stuff, it just seems like it is obviously, factually, actually the better moral decision when you factor in the life. Maybe that seems like a simplistic way to look at it, but I think that was how I was originally starting to think about it, was just doing a little bit of mathematics and thinking about the consequences of my action. Also, watch Meet Your Meat.
What you are about to see is beyond your worst nightmares. But for animals raised on modern intensive production farms and killed in slaughterhouses, it is cold, inescapable reality. Once you see for yourself the routine cruelty involved in raising animals for food, you'll understand why millions of compassionate people have decided to leave meat off their plates for good.
Spend a little bit of time like seeing how horrible the shit is, the way that these animals are treated. Like Kevin said, you know, pigs are smarter than dogs. Everybody loves bacon, but at the same time you have to be like, is it worth it? If you had to kill a dog to get some bacon, would you do it? I would not do it. I love dogs. Like, there's no way I could. Dogs are smart, emotional, sensitive beings. I mean, I don't know if you ever had a dog, you know, that they're people and that they have feelings too. You know, they can't talk, but they can understand a lot.
Sidney Brown, if I had to kill you to eat bacon, would you be okay with that? No?
Look at his eyes. He's a sweet little innocent being, you know? He's like a little child. It's like a sweet little child. I mean, if it was me or him and I was stranded on a desert island or whatever, and it was like I had to kill Sidney Brown to get some bacon, and it was like my only choice, like maybe, but I would do it. If I did do it, I would do it very hesitantly, and I would probably feel really bad about it. Another thing is that it's never going to be sustainable to eat meat because they consume more food than they produce. Think about how long an animal has to live, how much food they have to eat every single day for their whole life till they get to the point to where they're ready to be food. If you've given all this food to this animal for so long, it's drank so much water, it's consumed so many resources, you know, that you could have given to all these people who are starving all over the world, but instead you fed it all to this animal who's going to produce hardly any food back, and it's a wasteful use of resources, regardless of the suffering of the creature. It's just a bad investment.
Mm-hmm. Like there's some people that make the argument of, you know, animals grazing and whatnot, and that being a much more sustainable thing. I don't doubt that it is more sustainable, but we could still use that land in other ways. Like, you can't tell me that pasture land can't in some way be enriched in order to grow food on, and, you know, grain is going to be about 10 times as efficient as a food source for people as the same amount of animals on that land. And animals put so much of that energy and water that they're given, not just into creating meat, but also bones and skin and staying warm. It's just a losing proposition to have that be sustainable. I saw an estimate earlier, something like 75% of our rainforests have been cut down for meat. We're selling our present and future to have something
right now.
Right.
I would like to think that in the future we would look back on it as us being specious. We value ourselves as animals over other animals because we think we're special for like religious reasons and stuff like that. I would like to think that in the future we'll look back at how we're acting now and be shocked that we were so barbarous. Kind of like the way that we look back at slavery and think, how could we do that to these people? I think that one day we'll look back at the way that we treat our food animals and be really ashamed.
Right. And two of the main, you know, ethical arguments or the ethical ways that we weigh these decisions have to do with either the exploitation argument, or they're subjects of a life, they're not ours to use. they are their own beings that deserve respect and shouldn't be exploited for our benefit. And then the suffering of sentient beings, you know, the utilitarian argument. And I'm much more sympathetic to the suffering one. I think that anything that we can do to minimize the preventable suffering of sentient beings that can experience pleasure and pain, especially animals that are as complex as cows, pigs, horses, dogs, cats. I think we have a prima facie duty to do that, to minimize that suffering. I'm not as moved by the exploitation argument, but I do think that's also a really important consideration. Like, they really aren't ours to use, and if the relationship isn't, at least in some sense, symbiotic, then we're doing some grievous harm to them, and we're also doing something immoral from our own perspectives, if we really think about it.
It's interesting, like, not that long ago, I remember on The Daily Show, there was some dude who got arrested for, like, fucking a horse. And it seems kind of hypocritical to me, the kind of standards that we have about those kinds of things, because if you study, like, the way that we treat cows and stuff like that, I mean, I saw this machine once, or this device where they, like, had herded them in, where their, like, head sticks out the front, and, you know, they're, like, trapped in this little metal box while, like, a guy goes shoulder deep into this cow's, like, butt to feel if there's a pregnancy in there. And that's just like a check. That's not counting the actual masturbating of bulls and the impregnation of cows and all that kind of stuff, and the constant, like, milking and the taking away of the baby and turning them into veal. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize. If you're a veg, you know, you really can't support the dairy industry, otherwise you're supporting the veal industry most of the time, because those cows have to be kept pregnant to be able to continue to produce that milk. But right. I guess I'm trying to say that the whole system seems to be kind of based on, like, this idea like they're just things, and so we can molest them and rape them basically and yet at the same time this other dude gets thrown in jail for fucking a horse. And I mean, I don't know what that's about, but maybe the horse was somewhat enjoying it. Who's to say, like, in terms of pleasure and pain? But I could tell you that cow was not enjoying it when that dude had his whole freaking arm up inside of its butt. And that guy, it was like on a Morgan Spurlock show, and
yeah, Morgan, I saw that one.
Do you see that one?
Yeah, I think we were in the hotel in Daytona.
Yeah, we saw that together. And he asked him, and he said that he had broken his arm up inside one of those cows once, that it happens like that.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you that much. I wouldn't want someone's arm up inside me. And it's funny how selectively...
you kind of would.
Well, I mean, there was that one time...
in that hotel room. That's what you were...
That's exactly right. We tried to do that maneuver. But, I mean, I think what you're pointing to...
You didn't have that device. You kept getting away.
Right. Or that big glove.
I didn't have a long enough glove.
Yeah. But I think what you're pointing to is more broadly the selectiveness with which we apply our ethical standards to certain things. We want to say that certain things are wrong because they're not natural, but we drink cow's milk and do all sorts of unnatural things to animals in order to make more profit. We do incredibly unnatural things that most people don't see and wouldn't want to see. We would say, you know, for someone fucking a dog or a horse, not only is it unnatural, so we'd apply the unnatural in that perspective, but it's also, you don't have consent, so it's immoral. Why would you do that? Let's make it illegal. But I'm pretty certain that none of those pigs or cows offered any of their consent in order to be forcibly impregnated, in order to be slaughtered, in order to have their kids taken away, and that kid to be kept in a box for 6 months, force-fed. and then chopped up. There's no consent there, so it's a really unevenly applied standard of consent. And the same thing is true with suffering. We want to minimize suffering for pets. There are cruelty laws for animals that are pets. If someone's torturing their dog, that is something that we all frown upon, and we would probably put them in jail for 6 months to a year, depending on how egregious the violation was. But when there is filming of people torturing pigs and turkeys on a farm because they have been pushed to the mental brink, having a job where they're slaughtering these defenseless sentient creatures all day long in order to get their jollies, they're torturing some of these animals. And when the video of that comes out, we get angry at the person who took the video, rather than getting angry at either the system that creates that type of cruelty or the individuals who perpetrate it. So we, again, unevenly apply our standards. And I think that's what you're really pointing at there, is how unevenly we apply the standards that we supposedly have in terms of morality.
Yeah, I think it's more the case that people don't have moral standards. They have, like, post hoc or after the fact justifications for whatever it is that they feel like they want to do at any given time. So they just do what they want and then figure out how to justify it later.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is definitely what we would want in terms of moral reasoning, would be to have some kind of a moral standard or moral logic that when you apply it to other arguments, the logic stands up. And a lot of the times when you talk to people about the moral reasons and stuff like that, it's just not the case. They give all kinds of bad moral reasons where if you applied that to any field that we saw as morally wrong now, that same kind of justification, like, it's okay for me to eat meat because I like it. It's like, well, like, imagine if somebody said that about, rape or murder or like any of these other things that were slavery, that were somewhat, that it's similar to, to be frank. And of course not for rape, and of course not for murder, and of course not for slavery, but they want to have like a special set of moral justification.
Right.
They like
even like public nudity or public intoxication or drugs. We hold a firm line on that because of the good of society, and that it's wrong, even if it's a supposedly victimless crime, it's wrong. But there's a clear victim in these cases. And we hold the farming industry to a whole different standard than we do to even a pet owner.
And a lot of it has to do with just thinking, oh, my dog, that's a person, that's something I'm love and I'm sensitive about. I love animals. They'll say, I've had tons of people who like eat animals who tell me they love animals, and there seems to be some kind of a disconnect between thinking of this animal as a person and this animal as a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And probably a big part of that has to do with the fact that you're never going to get any of that animal's blood on your hand. You're never going to hear that animal scream. You're just going to go to the store and find it as this thing that's already wrapped in plastic, and you're totally disconnected from the whole process of how it got there.
Right.
Maybe now is a good time to talk about the bad reasons people give. A lot of the times when, like, just like a week ago, I posted some kind of thing on my Facebook about fake bacon, these vegan bacon substitutes. There was like 8 different ones, and I was saying how I really like the eggplant bacon, and I would have some of that. And the kind of responses that you get on there, I mean, I wasn't even necessarily trying to open up a vegan conversation with that necessarily, but it went there. The things that you get are like, oh, you can't call it bacon because it's not real bacon. Like, right. They think that you shouldn't get to have a vegan burger. You gave up burgers when you gave up meat. Like things like that. People point to their teeth. They're like, look at this tooth right here. It's pointy. That means I'm. It's like, dude, have you ever seen like the canines of a carnivore with their freaking pointy teeth. Man, you couldn't even chew a steak of raw steak, nor would you ever want to. Like when you're not attracted to the scent of roadkill on the side of the road, you know what I mean? Like, oh, that's the stuff, and you run over there and you just rip it open, like get it all. No person does that. No sane person does that. But we're like, oh, that's gross. We're repelled by that. But we go get a piece of meat and we cook the shit out of it, you know, and now we can eat it without getting sick. And then we think that we're carnivores. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
The major one that you usually get is just I like it, which as I said earlier is no kind of moral argument. I like it. So what? You know, like we shouldn't necessarily do everything that we like just because we like it.
Just ask Bill Cosby.
The other thing that a lot of people try to do is like they try to be like, well, so what? You do that. You're vegan or vegetarian, and I don't judge you for that. So maybe you shouldn't judge me. Like, how would that work in any kind of other moral argument? It's like, well, I don't judge you for not killing people.
Jeffrey Dahmer's on the stand at his murder trial, and he's like, well, listen, judge not lest ye be judged, okay? I don't judge you for your choice not to kill people, so...
It's just a lifestyle choice thing, you know? I'm at the top of the food chain. I think that I'm the most supreme thing through some kind of might makes right reasoning, and that's why I'm the best. It's because I'm advanced, but I live by the law of the jungle.
Yeah, the law of the jungle doesn't really apply when you get into your pickup truck and drive to the store, and you don't see lions buying wrapped up gazelles in the meat department, passing all the sushi and the Doritos.
Plus, I thought we were supposed to be civilized beings with rational moral standards, so we shouldn't be living by the law of the jungle. And if we are, we shouldn't claim to be elite because we act like animals. It's not like the toughest thing wins.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it is anymore. A lot of these people, it really is a lifestyle thing, and they're just living way in the past.
Oh yeah, and that's the sort of justification that people often give, is from the privileged perspective of being endorsed by the past. You know, a privileged group feels threatened anytime you question that privilege, and that, you know, Christmas is under attack or something, merely because you try to introduce some other options or question its supremacy in its ubiquity, and you know it turns into this kind of free speech issue of, you know, how dare you question my choice? How dare you try to limit me? How dare you criticize me? And people are seemingly allergic to criticism.
If we can't make these kind of judgments, then we can't live with each other. You know what I mean? Like, it's the foundation of society to have some kind of moral reasoning and justification where we're held to some kind of higher standard beyond just our own personal preferences. Like, if I beat my wife, would that be cool with you? If I, you know, like, is that just how I choose to live? Or is that not cool? And if you saw me doing that, you're going to say something about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of sad. People would say something about it if you're beating your wife. But if you kill 100 animals a year on average to live, you know, you're a mass murderer of animals. That's totally fine.
Right. And that's the real difficulty that you're faced with, is anytime you criticize people for their choices, they fall back immediately on the freedom of choice, rather than the personal responsibility that comes with the freedom of choice.
Absolutely, because freedom should come with responsibility. It's not like we should all just be free to do whatever we want, because if we were, there would be no such thing as society.
Right.
And, you know, another thing that I find slightly annoying is that, like, among a lot of my integral philosophy friends, they try to say being vegetarian or vegan, that's just green. Or, like, another way of saying that would be like, oh, that's just, like, hippie stuff. You know what I mean? It's just like a way of, like, saying, oh, it's, you know, that's just like those absolutist crazy people who are breaking things into, you know, these false binaries. When within integral theory there is what's called integral utilitarianism. They call it the greatest depth for the greatest span. Like, there's this idea, who's the guy who's, you know, who's talking about the greatest good for the greatest number?
Mill. But yeah, Bentham came up with the greatest good for the greatest number principle. It's he did kind of the rudimentary utilitarianism, and then Mill was his student who developed that further and developed a more kind of stratified idea of the greatest good for the greatest number in terms of pig pleasures and more refined pleasures. Shakespeare is a better and more refined, more sustainable pleasure than something like chicken wings or whatever. And then later on, like modern day people like Peter Singer. So he's the modern day proponent of utilitarianism, and he is a vegan as well. His idea is you know, that the greatest good for the greatest number should be applied to animals, even though even as far back as Bentham and Mill were entertaining that as an idea.
I happened to meet someone who was a vegetarian who got me asking myself about, am I justified in continuing to eat meat? What is it that gives us the right, or that justifies us in treating animals the way they get treated before they end up in our lunch or dinner or whatever it might be? And I read a little bit about factory farming, intensive farms, and the way they confine animals, which was something that was really just getting going at that stage. And I thought that you can't really justify this, that we've just taken for granted the idea that somehow humans have the right to use animals whichever way they want to. And that isn't defensible. The boundary of species is not something that really is so morally significant that it entitles us to take another sentient being who can suffer or feel pain and do as we wish with that sentient being just because we happen to like the taste of its flesh.
But yeah, so Singer is the modern day proponent of that, and he gets a lot of flack for being consistent in those moral propositions.
The integral version of it is like the greatest depth for the greatest span. So it's like not just the greatest good for the greatest number. I mean, in a way it is, but the idea is that you would want to increase the greatest amount of depth, or the greatest, you know, like for example, in the classic sort of moral conundrum of the trolley cart problem. In that kind of utilitarianism, it's just like a flat kind of like numbers game. Like, it'd be better to kill the one guy than the 5 guys. But with this kind of distinction, it's like, well, what if the one guy is the Dalai Lama and the 5 guys are all gang members? So the idea would be, in this kind of moral reasoning, is that you would want to increase the depth, because it's better to have a Dalai Lama in the world than it is to have these gang members, because this Dalai Lama has more depth and he's going to be able to help and care for more people than these gang members who are probably going to rob people. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're having a party or something like that. If I had that vegan stir-fry as opposed to the chicken stir-fry, everyone can eat the vegan stir-fry. Mm-hmm. No, like only the meat eaters can eat the meat stir-fry. So, but also nothing had to die. Like, and so it's like better to eat a pig or a cow than a person. It's better to eat a chicken than a pig or a cow. It's better to eat a fish than a chicken. It's better to eat like a bug than a fish. And it'd be better to eat a carrot than all of those. So it factors in depth. The other factor that it would take into account would be sustainability. And I've actually made a graph about this. You know, on one side is the vertical development of creatures and factoring that in, and on the other side is, you know, the circumstances of the situation. Is it local? Is it sustainable? Is it factory farmed? Is it far away? And I do think that there's a difference between if you or I went out onto a lake and fished up a fish and then went and ate it versus the way that a lot of these other like fish dudes, you know, they go out into the ocean and like rip up miles of ocean floor, destroying ecosystems for a certain amount of fish that they're going to use, and then they dump a whole bunch of it back. And it's a hugely, you know, destructive process. And so they both look like a fish. You know what I mean? Oh, the fish. But, you know, one is definitely way worse than the other. And that's kind of getting into this question of, like, is veganism in itself simply enough? But I don't want to jump ahead too much with that. But I just wanted to say that I do think going vegan or vegetarian does not necessarily have to be a simply kind of, well, I want to do it for me, for my health, or, you know, well, killing animals is bad. It could be also a nuanced moral distinction where people are weighing a bunch of these factors and coming to the conclusion through integral utilitarian ethics that this is the right thing to do. And I think that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Moral development is about extending the circle of who you think is worthy of moral consideration. So we start out being egocentric. So me and maybe mommy and daddy, you know, my immediate, especially me, is deserving of whatever I can get. Then I become, you know, clan-centric and include more people. I become ethnocentric and include a bigger number of people. And this is where actually a lot of people stop in this world, is that they only think that people in their own tribe or their own nation maybe is worthy of moral consideration in the same way they are. And as we move forward, we have eventually, as we move into green, we have a world-centric consciousness where everybody is included, every human being is included. And then there's actually a stage beyond that, and it starts coming in at green, and of course there are people who have always spiked into this moral territory in this one line of development. They may be center of gravity, you know, orange or modern or so forth. But they begin to see that animals, too, have a sentience, and that they are also inside the circle of creatures and beings that are worthy of moral consideration. And that's one of the things that is absolutely happening. It's just a natural function of development. Again, moral development is about learning things. We learn about animals feeling pain, and we learn about the emotional systems of animals. And we have pets. And we realize, oh my goodness, there's a being in there. There's somebody who sees me and I can see and who loves me. And there's a second person. There's an actual we space that I could have with another animal. And then it becomes untenable to accommodate these, you know, meat factories, these huge confinements where these animals are treated as units of production. You know, they're widgets in a system of eggs or milk or meat, in a way that doesn't take their interiors into account. And that's no longer acceptable.
I hate that when people say that it's green. That's so ignorant. It's like, yeah, you know what? Recycling is probably green, too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't need to do that anymore because we've transcended that stage. Caring about the environment, it's so green. I've transcended that. Now I see the whole world as my dream and my projection. That's why I'm truly evolved. I've evolved beyond caring about anything. I have spiritually bypassed everything.
I've transcended and included to the point where I've included everything that I want and gotten rid of everything else that might be hard.
Everything that's hard, I have transcended, and I have included all the things that I like. I mean, that's like the major problem with, a lot of these so-called integralists, is that they don't really integrate diversity with discernment, and then they just wind up making a map of their own preferences. And that is hugely problematic. That's bad integration.
Yep.
So one of the things that I always find pretty frustrating is when these people talk about, oh, plants are alive too, so you're just as bad as us because we're all killing things. It just seems really dishonest to me that these people are comparing killing a plant with killing a living, like conscious, evolved creature, and they've just conflated all life into this flatland. That is crazy to me, because it's not necessary to eat meat where it is necessary to eat something. So it seems like if you could eat the least kind of complicated thing that causes the least amount of suffering of beings that, have brains and limbic systems to feel, that's a better way to go.
Yeah, I think that's clearly the idea, is to minimize suffering and to not exploit things that are conscious and feeling beings. Sure, tomato plants react to adverse stimuli and things like that, but they do so through releasing certain chemicals in a much, much more simplistic way than something that possesses a central nervous system or nerve cells, let alone things that have brains that are able to process ideas, thoughts, emotions, and retain memories. That to me is a completely different situation than something that might change in reaction to outside stimuli. That's fine, but to say, that a tomato plant's crying out in pain is, I think, intellectually disingenuous, and to conflate things that morally have very, very little in common.
It seems dishonest, doesn't it? It seems like, come on, you really don't think that killing this tomato is the equivalent of killing this animal. If you're going to say there's a distinction between killing an animal and killing a person, then it seems like there has to be a distinction between killing an animal and killing a tomato.
Right. Over and above that, because they'll also say vegetarian diets kill all these field mice. Modern farming practices kill field mice and other things due to the reapers and the threshers and these other machines. So blood's on your hands as well. But in both circumstances, the efficiency is much greater and the impact is much lower. 10 field mice killed in the production of a field of grain, while not ideal, is much better than 10 field mice killed in a field of grain that's fed to 2 cows. Because the cows are going to be eating those vegetables. Those modern farming practices are used to feed those cows, which are then used to feed those people. So, if they really cared about the screaming plants or the field mice, they would stop eating the meat as well, because of just how inefficient, even if vegetarianism is merely twice as efficient, well, that means that that's half as many plants screaming out in pain or field mice that are caught in threshers. If they actually cared about those rather than a way as a dodge to attack vegetarians, a vegetarian cuts out the middleman and about 6 times as efficiently, 8 times as efficiently gets the nutrients that they need, don't have to kill the cow, and they require less plants, less water, less deforestation. So if these people that were throwing out those arguments actually cared about either field mice or screaming tomatoes, they would eat those screaming tomatoes and that wheat Like, if they cared about the environmental impact or the suffering, it still would be the moral choice to go vegetarian, even if tomatoes were screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, that's true.
But instead, it's just used as a, well, there's bone in chalk and animal products in the road, so you're not a vegan. You know, it's just trying to poke holes in order to ignore.
And it's not like we claim to be perfect. We're just trying our best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's all we can really ask for somebody to do morally, anyways. You know, not everybody, you know, this is something we're going to talk about later, but I mean, it's not always easy to just decide morally like I did and then just do it. It took me a lot of years to, you know, to go from being a veg to vegan, because I had to figure out how to do that in a sustainable way. And it was difficult to go from being a meat eater to a vegetarian. It takes time. One of the other things that I get sometimes from like the more hippie kind of people, often, I don't know, hopefully they don't take that as a derogatory, this idea of like, it wanted to die for me and I appreciate the animal and things like that. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that no living being wants to die. That's why we have the fight or flight instinct in us. You know, the day that, you know, an animal walks up and puts your gun in its mouth, or comes and just lays on your doorstep, you know, then maybe I'll believe that it wanted to die for you. But, you know, that's ridiculous. And the whole I appreciate it thing, it's almost like a Native American kind of relationship with the animals, where it's almost like they've done some kind of psychological deal with themselves in some kind of a magical, believy kind of way, where somehow it's okay because I appreciate it. It gave its life to me. We're just trading energy. We're just the one thing in an absolute sense. And I mean, I would say that is a form of spiritual bypassing. That's like ignoring the real suffering of this creature that you say that you appreciate, to be able to do what you want to do, really. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's that same person who says that they love animals, but then still kind of unconsciously eats them. What do you think about like these almost dishonest-seeming arguments, like the flatland of all life is equal and it wanted to die for me, versus the totally blunt, like, you know, fuck it because I can, because I like it, because, you know, might makes right. Like, I almost, in some sense, respect the people who are honest enough to just admit that they do it because they like it, more than these people who have, like, tricked themselves into some kind of bullshit justification, because at least the other people are honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like the hunters who are actually going to go out there and get that blood on their hand and like actually know what it is to kill an animal, you know, like to, in some extent, you know, it's like kind of upsetting, because I feel like most people probably wouldn't do it. When given the earlier stir-fry chicken or not challenge, most people, I feel like, probably wouldn't kill that chicken to get the chicken one.
Yeah.
I would think that most people would just be like, no, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Give me this other one. But there are people out there who would kill that chicken. And in some sense, you can respect them more because they actually are in touch with the real costs of what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's how I feel about it as well. You know, you have a lot of people that are so removed from their food supply that they just don't understand where it comes from and the cost of it, and as a result don't respect it. And that goes for some vegans and vegetarians as well. When I TA'd for ethics, I did these moral experiments and whatnot. Thought experiments. Sometimes they were kind of tricks, but one of them was I told all the members of the class that we were going to have a barbecue, and that I'd okayed it with the school, and that we were going to get our hands on, it was a class of 20, so it was like, I said 8 chickens. And I needed volunteers in order to kill the chickens and clean them for us to have this barbecue. It was a free barbecue, but we had to kill them, cook them, and eat them for that to happen. How many people were willing to kill these animals out behind the pottery shed with an axe? And out of 20, I got maybe 2 or 3 hands.
And then you're like, okay, now how many of you here eat meat?
And it was all of them. It was all one.
That's a great experiment, man.
Yeah, and I don't think that we should do anything that we're not at least morally willing to do. You know, like, sure, we're not going to operate on somebody. You know, I'm not saying that we should all be comfortable enough with blood that we should be, you know, surgeons, you know, our own surgeons.
But it's an open thing where if you had the knowledge, you would be willing to do the thing or whatever. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. But a vast majority of people that I've encountered are not willing to kill their own food. And to me, that says that we have an artificial relationship with what we eat, and we are paying people to murder for us. And I very seldom use the word murder in that context. But
I try not to use it too, because people will just dismiss what you're saying as being extremist or something, because in the culture it's so dismissed because of all the people who have come with such an extreme perspective about it. But it's true, you know, if we admit that they're sentient beings and we admit that we're killing them, that's fucking murder. I don't know what else you could call it, you know what I mean? That's why we're upset about it.
Yeah. You know, and I think that gets lost a lot of time, and people want to dismiss people as being hysterical for phrasing it like that. I certainly don't feel like I'm hysterical. And when I phrase it like that, I mean, I can touch meat. I sell it on a regular basis as a manager of a restaurant. I do plenty of things. I mean, the fact that I can do it doesn't mean that it's not the thing that we say that it is. Some of the best people who can speak to the atrocities of slaughterhouses and whatnot are former slaughterhouse workers and slaughterhouse owners and farmers who have gone vegetarian or vegan, and can attest to the terror that these animals experience in their last moments.
If you haven't seen it, you should definitely go check out Meet Your Meat and hear Alec Baldwin narrate the horrors of factory farm animal atrocities, and then tell me it doesn't feel fucked up, dark, and terrible. I mean, there's all kinds of videos online about, you know, pig farms and stuff, and you can see the tiny little crates, even in the ones where, you know, it's not like dun 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 meet your meat, you know what I mean? The ones where it's just like, look, here's some pigs, and this, I mean, it's still like a tiny, they can't even move, they're in this tiny little box, they're covered in shit, it's disgusting. They've been mutilated, you know, in multiple ways. It's a horrible thing. If you push yourself in that creature's perspective, even for a second, if you put your care for your dog into that animal just for a second, like, you gotta know that shit is not cool at all. And you know, almost every person I've ever heard debate anything about meat they'll all like immediately admit that they're against factory farming.
Yeah, it's become a common thing to say that, you know, yeah, I'm against factory farming.
Every person who's willing to speak on it in a rational kind of way, where they're going to give any kind of case for why we should eat meat, they are going to say that they're against factory farming, and they're gonna want to have more free range kind of animals or something like that. And of course that's better. Of course it's better. But it would be better still if you didn't do that. And you can not do that. That is totally a viable option. I'm fine. I haven't eaten meat in years. Kevin's fine. I know people who have never eaten meat in their entire life, and they're fine. They're healthy. They're, probably way healthier than, your average meat eater at least. We'll say that. Have you heard any good arguments against veganism or vegetarianism? Like, one of the things that I've heard is, you can't just expect everyone everywhere to be vegetarian, and if they're supposed to eat locally, and that's the thing. And what about people who live in, really wintry climates where they can't grow things local and sustainable? Can we expect those things of them? Going back to this doing our best kind of thing, I think that applies there too. And maybe if those people care about what's going on and what we're talking about, maybe they should move to a more sustainable location.
I think it goes to a larger issue, whether those people have the ability to do so, and that speaks to larger issues of geopolitical,
economics and cultural situations and stuff like that. Like, yeah, maybe it's not just a matter of like, well, I'm going to the market today and I can choose from all of these options, whatever I like. It's like, no, you have a limited budget and you only know what you know. And
But I mean, I think that the Tibetan yak farmers are the least of the worries in terms of tipping points and sustainability. I'd say at the lowest estimate, 85% of the people on this planet live in a place where you can grow food and you aren't by necessity relegated to an animal-only diet or even an animal diet. I think it's the extremes where people are living up in the mountains, snowy climate, and they're unable to grow their own food. That number can go down substantially the more that we present solutions. We can grow hydroponically these days. We can grow things in greenhouses a lot more. So in the future, I don't think there'll be a corner of the planet that you can't grow food, plant food.
So that's not necessarily problematic. What about people who say things like, all these animals that we have basically taken care of and like hybridized for our own uses, they can't survive in the wild. They're gonna go extinct.
Like the other arguments we talked about earlier, I think that those are largely disingenuous, and if they actually cared about those animals,
let's keep them alive so that way we can kill them. Right? It's like, why not just, okay, wouldn't it be, like, in terms of suffering, better if they all went extinct, if that's the only other option? And it's not going to just all happen tomorrow or something, like everyone's going to quit.
Yeah, we're facing the next great extinction on this planet. All of these wild animals are dying off because we have cleared a majority of the rainforests out. We've destroyed, like I said, 75% of these rainforests because we want meat and we want it cheap. So we have literally brought about the extinction of thousands of other animals. If people felt that strongly about the continued existence of the cow, we could have petting zoos. We could have, other, let wild horses and wild cows roam the Midwest. Let them roam Montana if that's a legitimate concern. But it's not a legitimate concern. It's one of those I'm pretending to be compassionate while ironically satirizing your position.
If we free the slaves, what's going to happen to all the cotton farmers? They're going to be, well, you're not compassionate enough towards them.
Or, which was an actual argument during slavery, was these are uneducated slaves that have no self-care skills, so if we let them out in the wild, or if we let them, try to take care of themselves, they'll surely die. We're doing them a favor by keeping them in chains. I tell you that given those choices, the slaves would have rather either been emancipated or died than to be continually under the boot heel of southern plantation owners who treated them in a very similar fashion to modern factory farms.
And I think if you extend the same compassion that you would want if you were that animal or whatever, you would probably rather be free or go extinct or die. You know what I mean? Than fucking live like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like with those other arguments about, all the dead field mice and screaming tomatoes, I think that it's just a really fatuous and morally disingenuous argument.
Well, those are good arguments. What do you think is a good argument?
I haven't seen that many, to be honest. Let me think about it for a second.
Okay.
I've heard the we're all different argument. Don't try to put everybody in one box. It's good for some people, but it's not good for others, which I don't think holds a whole lot of water.
Right, like some people talk about different blood types and shit like that.
Yeah, well, beyond the blood type diet, which, I think is generally recognized by physicians as being completely full of crap, is the cases where certain people, like it was brought up, like this particular type of hyperthyroidism or whatever, these people need meat and this and that, and then I looked it up and it was like, well, that doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, that was similar to what my friend had and overcame with a vegan diet, and there are people that prescribe that, but saying for the sake of argument that was the case and that certain people, like a small percentage of the population, say, 2%, were unable to sustain a vegan diet for particular health reasons, allergies and whatnot. I still don't think that would really be a good argument against the majority of people going vegan.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. And based on the morality that I gave earlier, like it being necessary was like the key word, right? So if you could show that you had to eat meat, well then you should. But if you don't have to, well then you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. But I've yet to be shown any circumstance where a person or a group of people wasn't able to get those same nutrients from other sources. I'm sure there are people that maybe are gluten and soy and allergic to beans as well, but in that case, maybe they get a pass in the meantime, but that seems to be a medical argument for supplementation or more sustainable meat practices. But yeah, I've yet to see a situation where I've been presented with a good argument that people in large amounts should not be vegan as a matter of morality or something like that. Yeah, I can't even think of a good argument against veganism that I've come across, and I've come across a lot of arguments against veganism over the past 9 or 10 years.
I've never heard a good argument against it either. I've seen a lot of people try, but a lot of the shit that they trot out just seems to fail.
Yeah, and like I said before with the evolutionary argument, maybe at a certain point it did confer certain evolutionary advantages to have that dense protein that allowed for us to make great leaps and bounds, but it wasn't anything specific to meat. Meat just happened to be that ready source of nutrients that our body needed, and we can get those nutrients from other sources much more sustainably now.
And capitalism was really good when we first thought of it, with the Industrial Revolution and whatnot. We didn't foresee any of these ecological crisis problems that we're seeing now, Like in terms that just seems like another bad logical argument. Like it was good in the past, so that means it's good forever. I don't know that's necessarily the case, you know? But
Right.
yeah, I mean, these are some of the most, like, I guess, practical kind of arguments that you get where you're kind of like, yeah, oh, well, you have a point, but it doesn't really mean that we shouldn't be vegan.
Right, like fossil fuels gave us amazing leaps forward in terms of technology, but it doesn't mean that that's always a justification for it. Rather, we can move past it and have a much more successful future if we realize that we got the benefits out of the thing and we can outgrow it.
Why don't people go vegan? Like, what's the big problem? What's the big psychological block, you think? Like, why is it when we talk about these things that people aren't like more like, oh, cool, interesting, oh, I want to learn more about that. Oh, let me try some of this food that you got. I'm interested in it. Why aren't more people like that? Why are so many people so defensive? What do you think is going on?
Mostly habit, inertia, custom, and comfort. There's, they're used to it. They don't feel like changing. Change is scary. Change is hard. They don't feel like having to cook something else, and they don't feel like they should have to. So, they immediately get defensive and resentful of anybody that would suggest that they would change, and fall back on a freedom argument. Well, it's my freedom to do what I want. How dare you judge me? Things like that. We live in America where we're free. But very often I think that it's fear of change and just being accustomed to certain things. It's hard to break out of a certain cycle, hard to start doing something different or new, and very easy to rationalize away the reasons why you would want to even try to.
Yeah. For me, it was a combination of things. Like, it wasn't just arguments that moved me, and it wasn't just social pressure, although both of those things were good, and so thank you. But it was also, I think, one of the most convincing things, for me at least, was food. Having delicious vegan food and being like, oh, I could eat this. Like, I don't feel like I'm missing out. I feel like this is delicious. I would be happy to have this. I feel like the main reason that people aren't able to change is because it seems so foreign. Like, one of the major questions I always get is, what do you eat? Like, people think I eat salad and stuff like that. I'm like, I eat just about everything that you eat except for it's better. I have my shepherd's pie, I have risotto. I mean, actually, you probably don't have those things. Never mind. That shit's too delicious for you. I have pizza. I have stuffed peppers. I have soups. I have delicious curries and stir fries, and I mean, we make vegan Philly cheesesteak. We make vegan French toast. We make vegan chocolate cake. We make vegan fucking everything because we can, and it's still delicious. Now, a lot of people say that stuff doesn't taste good, and I will say that, before I went veg, that I have in my life definitely on a few occasions come across people who would give me things, and I'm like, ugh, this is disgusting. This is a horrible alternative. This is gross. I don't want that. I've also come across meat substitute products that I think are awesome and delicious, like all the Gardein products. I really like all of them. I've tried so many. They have like a huge wide variety, like 5 different kinds of chickens for different things. It's stringy, it's pulley, it's chewy. You can fry it. It's got flavor. Maybe it's not exactly like chicken, but it's really good. It's got the same kind of like texture, and if you flavor it right, it's good. Like, I don't really think that people even like meat. I think that they like whatever it's seasoned with.
Right. I mean, and meat is a textured flavor vehicle. I mean, I won't say that there isn't something important and flavorful about the fattiness, the fat on our taste buds, and the savory taste, the umami, the taste that's activated by glutamate receptors. You know, that savory flavor definitely appeals to us, but I think that it's easy enough to get that in other ways once you know how to not have any real justification from a taste perspective not to switch.
As a vegan, trying to, like, you know, share that with people, that I get a lot further with sharing delicious vegan treats with people. And then when they ask me about why, you know, I go that way, that's when I tell them. But I don't expect the arguments in themselves to be convincing alone. It has to be something that you think that you can do. And I think that because so many people don't understand what veganism is, they haven't had the food, they just feel like it's scary. It's like you're trying to take away the things that I know how to eat. And when people start messing with your food, like, you become like a wild animal and shit, and you're like, back off, man! Like, that's my food.
Right. You're trying to take the only thing I know away from it. It's like the fear that people would experience if you tried to ban cars, but give them bullet trains or something. You know, that they could get to a place faster, more efficiently, and wouldn't even have to drive. But
cars are American. I've always driven a car. My daddy gave me a car. I love cars. I like classic cars. I like big engines. I don't care if it burns gas. It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you run into is the inertia and then the kind of retrograde reactionism that you're going to find anytime that you try to take something from someone that thinks that what they love or what they know is going to disappear, leaving them without. They feel like their way of life is under attack, even if it's not, and even if you're offering something potentially better in a number of ways. But
growth is slow and painful, and people often only learn the hard way, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Is it hard to be a vegan, Kevin?
I was gonna joke and say yes, or the hardest thing I've ever done, or like fake quote the Peace Corps, be like the toughest job you'll ever love. And there's something true about that. Like for the first probably 6 months, it's rocky because you don't know how to replace it, especially in my case because I wasn't used to eating vegetables. So, for me, the transition wasn't seamless. I initially failed at being a vegetarian because I had no idea how to cook vegetables for me or how to like them. So I fell into the, kind of unsustainable cooking trap and ran up against the limitations of my own experience. After the initial period of adjustment, it is really easy. And the parts that aren't easy are at least exciting and new and interesting. You can eat with the same amount of health vegan without paying any more. You can probably save money. If you want pre-made stuff, you want pre-made burritos, you want frozen dinners, you can have that. If you want to make, like mac and cheese and tenders nightly, the options are there at this point, to the point where you won't notice that much of a difference. If you want to, eat greasy food as a vegan, there's absolutely nothing standing in your way, and you can do it almost as easily, especially these days with the ubiquity of vegan food.
Check out these pulled pork pockets. They have little black bean burgers. They got little chicken patty things. And when you're feeling real lazy and you don't feel like cooking, there are these like delicious vegan treats for you, for you nasty lazy motherfuckers.
Yeah, and you can do just about whatever you did before without much break in your routine. But what I find exciting about it is the ability to find new things to make and try.
I mean, that's the thing, is that you learn how to cook, right? Because now you're going to be mostly cooking your own things because you're eating way better. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched Kitchen Nightmares or anything like that, but I really like the idea of cooking my own food because I know everything that went in it. I know it was made with love and it's made to my personal preference. And like you're saying, it's like an art. You know, I feel like I didn't even learn about food and any of that, or understand like the art of getting the right flavor, texture combinations and stuff like that. My palate really came alive, and cooking as an art came alive to me when I went veg and vegan.
Right, and it's such a fundamental thing, like you were talking about before. The things that you eat become your body, become your energy, and that fundamental relationship with food has many times been lost for people. Back in the Great Depression times, 75 or more % of people, it's estimated, grew their own food and knew how to make food.
Most people you talk to like don't know how to cook at all. It's like, do you eat? You eat every day, right? Like what, 2 or 3 times every day, and you don't know how to cook? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's literally crazy. Because, you know, not even from like a doomsday prepper standpoint or something where like it were something to happen, could you take care of yourself? But like just from the most basic fundamental standpoint of feeling good about feeding yourself, knowing what's going into your body, knowing what's going into the process, knowing how to cook for yourself if you had to. And the fact that when you cook for yourself, you feel good about it, you feel accomplished, and it's also half as expensive. When you cook for yourself, you can make, for the same price, 4 times the amount of food and eat it. You know, like I am able to make 3 or 4 times the amount of food that I would pay someone else to make me. And on top of that, it's organic very often.
And you have leftovers, so you can just heat it up later. That's pretty great.
Yeah, I ate soup today that I made a day or 2 ago that had kale and potatoes and chickpeas and carrots and onions. It was like a creamy kale spicy soup. It was real rich and good. I'm about to take the remaining kale. It's this pre-cut organic kale at Publix for like $4 a bag, just a ton of it. Throw it into a stir fry now with some noodles and some baked tofu. Throw some carrots in there. Do something different with it, and that is really clean. You don't have a bunch of preservatives. You don't have a bunch of animal fats. You don't have You don't have any hormones. Any additional things. You know, the ingredients lists are very short, and you know exactly what's going into your food, and you can make a lot more of it cheaper and feel good about it, both in terms of how it makes you feel when your body turns it into energy, and you have a much more authentic relationship with your food and the way that you have crafted a meal for yourself. So you feel self-sufficient, you feel accomplished, you know what's in it, and you feel better as a result of all those things. And the fact that most people don't cook after that experience, I find to be sad. I don't.
Like not being able to read or something like that.
Yeah, it's culinary literacy. And most people lack the basic culinary literacy, both in terms of nutrition and taste, that they should have in order to feed themselves. And it is precisely for that reason that they are left to the mercy of the major food conglomerates who can pull the wool over their eyes, feed them bullshit, and make them think that they're choosing something.
Going back to the question about is it hard? There's something I would maybe want to add, is that sometimes it's hard to find places to eat in like the local food environment, and sometimes It's hard to find stores that carry all the good options for you. But more and more, there are options, and there are things that you can find at restaurants and stuff like that. Sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible and get sides, but it's doable.
It's probably, what, like 8 years for you, almost,
Yeah.
and 9 for me. Like, when I first went vegan, there was so few options that, like, you went to a restaurant and said that you were a vegan, they looked at you like you
What's a vegan?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now, Publix, the supermarket near where I live, they stock a really good amount of vegan options in the freezer section, in the produce section, different places. There's the Greenwise section. So you have a lot more access to these vegan options. Companies are realizing that the demand is there, so they'll print on their labels whether there are animal products in there and whether, like, companies will be proud of being vegan. I had this amazing Smart Balance white cheddar popcorn that blew my mind. It was so good. It's becoming more and more common in grocery stores and restaurants to offer vegan options because they want that money. They want people to come and frequent their store. They realize that people with dietary restrictions are very often the limiting factor when it comes to coming to your restaurant. I pushed hard to get vegan options on our menu at the restaurant that I work at, and I phrased it from the standpoint of we need to offer these if we want to be a viable selection for most people who want to come with their family. If all we offer is something really simplistic like a salad, people are going to say, no, I'll go somewhere else that actually offers a little bit more diversity. And then the first explicitly vegan thing that we put on our menu, largely because I suggested that we do it, is this portobello mushroom that's stuffed with quinoa and black beans that are spiced and then served over top of wilted garlic spinach with romesco sauce, which is a red pepper, like a bell pepper sauce, and then avocado and red peppers. And it is really, really good. And as a result of it being really, really good, that's the dish that we put in our advertisements. The cover, the museum that I work at, they have put that in their advertisements as an artful piece of culinary work, and I would say that most of the ones that we sell aren't even to vegans.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about it being like the greatest step for the greatest span. Veganism is an ism, and basically what it means is that you don't buy any kind of animal products, basically. You don't support any kind of thing that would support animal suffering. Veganisms don't buy leather belts. They try not to buy leather shoes. Like the shoes that I'm rocking today are vegan kicks. It's called Macbeth's. These shoes I'm rocking, these vegan shoes, Macbeth's. So vegans try not to support anything that has any kind of animal products in it. But I think sometimes, in some sense, veganism is goes a little bit too far, and in some sense it doesn't go far enough. Like, for example, usually vegans don't eat honey. Like, they think honey, that's an animal byproduct, so they're not going to mess with it. But, you know, there's a lot of vegan products that are owned by huge corporations.
Yeah, a large number of them are. Not even things like Boca, Morningstar, which are owned by, I believe, ConAgra and Monsanto, or something similar. There's a big chart that has all the different conglomerates that own organic food companies and vegan options. There are definitely some independently owned ones, but the majority, they are in large part owned by major conglomerates. And you know, as much as I try to buy local and support small stuff, I think leveraging the larger companies to start offering more vegan options and doing more sustainable practices might be an even better option in terms of more widespread change, because it allows access to those things for the people that don't have access to the local operations, and it requires those larger conglomerates and companies to manufacture less of what they normally would in terms of meat products and less sustainable options, and instead start offering organic, fair trade vegan options in their place. So, yeah, I'm a bit mixed on it. I try not to, a lot of times won't buy Cascadian Farm cereal or whatever because it's owned by ConAgra, and a lot of things are owned by companies that I don't necessarily want to support. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be some sort of compromise made there, because if you don't go to restaurants that also serve meat, well, that's questionable how much that's going to hurt that company, and maybe a more sustainable and logical solution is to go there and start demanding better products and show that there is a demand for those things, and then people who maybe aren't vegan, like I said, will come and order those things off the menu and realize that it is a sustainable and tasty option that they could actually eat like that more often. But if you don't show the people that there is that demand, then it's going to be business as usual.
Yeah, and so in that regard, just veganism in itself can kind of not be enough when it comes to factoring in sustainability and how far things have to travel for them to get to them, and supporting corporations and stuff like that. But they can also be a little bit rigid and strict in other ways that might start to be kind of unreasonable, where they step on their own ability to make progress for the future. That's why I like to think in terms of betters and not just, adhere to an ism. Like, I'm just doing the best that I can right now, and my general best that I can is veganism. It's not hard. It's something that I've had to work up to a little bit, but right now it's the best that I can do, and I'm pretty proud of it.
As well you should be. And that's not to say that all is said and done. When you go vegan, you've done all that you can for the planet, or all that you can for your fellow animals or your fellow people or anything like that. It's just saying that you have made the choice to make a change in your diet that will hopefully lead to better options, better choices on your part, better choices on other people's part. And that doesn't mean that we don't also have a responsibility to work to maybe end sweatshops or to try to curtail pollution in other ways, things like that as well. It just means that you have made the deliberate choice to cut animal products out of your diet. That's not the whole story in terms of food either. If you're trying to be sustainable and it's not just a health issue, then you should also consider the food miles involved in getting your quinoa to you, how it was cultivated, whether it was fair trade, whether the farmers were paid a living wage, whether there's any deforestation involved in the products that you select. I mean, you can be a vegan and still have an enormous negative impact on the planet if you choose foods that are really high in food miles and are farmed unsustainably, and they treat the workers poorly.
Yeah, so I mean, I realize that I still have a ways to go in terms of refining and trying to be a better citizen on this planet, and that I have to take responsible for how all my veggies and all that stuff get to me too. And so it's not just as simple as adhere to this ism and it's all good. I still drive a car, but luckily I live in Fayetteville, and there's all kinds of bike trails and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really want to do to try to be a better citizen is not just to go vegan, but to try and drive my car less and to try and ride bikes more. That's one of the things that I want to do to do better myself. So I think that there's always more that we can do. We can always do better, and we should always be open to learn about how we can do better, and not just be frustrated and take those criticisms as people telling you that you suck or something like that, or that they think that they're better than you or something.
No, I think that's a great point. Veganism is just one step in trying to make the world better in a sustainable way, and to me it feels like such a fundamental choice because it is the thing that you put in your body. It's how you sustain yourself, so it takes on this added symbolism, and it's a daily thing that you can't go without food. So that's a daily choice that you make, whether you're going to contribute to suffering and make unhealthy choices, or you're going to try to curtail the suffering and make healthier ones.
You've convinced me. I'm the viewer. I'm like, okay, I want to do it. I want to go veg. I want to go vegan. It seems like the right thing to do. These guys are really smart. They seem like they know what they're talking about. What should we do? What should the interwebs people do?
I'd say if you're trying to go vegan and the prospect of something that big is kind of daunting, to make it a gradual change, because it's really easy when you're trying to make changes to your routine, either diet or exercise or a new job or anything like that, to get overwhelmed and then blame the choice and say that it's unsustainable when you just aren't prepared to make that big of a change. Like I said, I did it gradually. I tried vegetarianism, and then I had to start from scratch, and then just slowly move down and take beef out of my diet, pork, poultry, and then eventually fish and eggs. So if it seems like it's a big challenge and you're not used to eating a lot of vegetables, or that you're going to miss something right off, that it's going to be too much of a challenge to go cold turkey, then I'd say make it a gradual transition. A couple times a week, go vegan, see what you can do, see if you can make some tasty new things and start incorporating them into your diet. The best way to do that, I'd say, is to find some good cookbooks that you'd like. I like Itza Chandra Moskowitz. She does some really good stuff. She's got an online site called the Post-Punk Kitchen, and they've got free recipes there.
Hey, it's the Post-Punk Kitchen. This is our Mexcellent show. Hey! We've got the Cuban Cowboys because we couldn't get menudo. And today we're going to be making tamales
with seitan and chipotle peppers,
guacamole, salsa verde,
papaya salsa,
and horchata. And because no fiesta is complete without a piñata, we have a piñata that looks a little bit like George Bush.
The first one I ever got was Vegan with a Vengeance. There's a lot of stuff that takes maybe 20-30 minutes to make, and it's really good. There's good recipes in there for Thai curries and all sorts of other really neat stuff that is really filling and hearty. And I'm still a person who likes hearty food. A lot of people get the impression that vegans only subsist on green, crispy, cold vegetables, and that's certainly not the case. So I'd say books like The Voluptuous Vegan, The Veganomicon, Viva La Vegan, Vegan Brunch, Vegan Diner is a really good one that has a lot of recipes for like milkshakes and home fries and veggie burgers and stuff, that if you're not doing it to also cut down on fat intake or caloric intake, they're really hearty and comfort foods and stuff. Or Sundays at Moosewood, which is a vegetarian cookbook that you can convert to vegan recipes pretty easily. That's the way to go. Sundays at Moosewood kind of dovetails into the other advice that I'd give, and what made my transition a lot easier is make it kind of an explorative process, a journey into different ethnic foods. Indian and Thai are both really good because they are cultures that are very familiar with vegetarianism, so you can eat out of those restaurants and try new things, and they're used to catering to vegetarians.
It's all about all these really good flavor combinations and stuff like that. It's really amazing. I feel like a lot of that kind of food really opened up my eyes and my palate to what food could be like.
Yeah, and I tried a lot of new vegetables through eating Indian and Thai food, Thai eggplant, and I tried okra. I was always told that okra was terrible, but through those things, I was able to try new vegetables and new spices and actually start to be a lot more open in my tastes and find new things that I liked. And in that way, it seemed more like an adventure and less like some kind of monastic thing where I was just denying myself for ethical reasons. It seemed like a positive instead of a negative. So yeah, I'd say get some good vegan cookbooks. There are a number of really good websites that are free. Epicurious is a good one. Food Network has some good stuff. Post-Punk Kitchen, pretty much any recipe that you want to veganize, someone's already done it online. Just a ton of resources online that you can access for free. YouTube as well. It has some of those processes that you might not be as familiar with if you don't cook very often, spelled out online, and you can follow along with the videos. If you miss ice cream, the coconut milk ice cream from So Delicious is...
So delicious.
It's fantastic. A lot of people say that they like it as well or better. Daya is a good substitute for cheese. Cheese substitutes are getting better every year. A Gardein is a really good one that we've already talked about in terms of either chicken or beef substitutes, or their kind of pulled pork sandwich stuff that they have is really good as well. Their meatballs are pretty good, but you can make lentil meatballs that are healthier. But if you're craving some of that stuff, you want to scratch that itch, Gardein does a good job. Beyond Meat is one that it's a company that Bill Gates invested in because he thinks that the future of food is one that exists beyond meat, and it's really good. Some of the things about it are better than Gardein. I like both of them quite a bit, and for $3.50 to $5 you can get a bag and augment whatever dish that you want to augment. Just because you're going vegan doesn't mean that you have to forego hearty foods. I love beans, nuts, seeds. Tempeh is really good. Tofu, if you bake it right, is really good, or you fry it up. I made some really good dishes with both of those things this week that I liked an awful lot. You can make a lot of really neat desserts without a whole lot of effort, and they not only taste good but are a lot better for you than the ones that are full of butter and milk fat and things like that. But yeah, if it seems daunting, make it a gradual process. It's a lot more likely that you'll be firing on all four cylinders 6 months down the road rather than rejecting it because it was too hard. I hear some people complain that they can't do veganism, or they tried it for a couple of months and they weren't able to do it. But that's often the result of people not knowing how to make it a sustainable part of their life. Like I said, have been vegan for 9 years. David about 8. I have friends that have done it for 10, 11, 15 years. And it's something that after a while you don't even notice as a part of your life. It's just something that you do. But I can tell you from experience, I don't spend more time now that I'm a vegan cooking or cleaning than I did when I wasn't one. It just took a little while to actually adjust to the practice. If you can go vegan whole hog or cold turkey, go ahead and do that. I think that's a great thing to do. And if that is part of your resolution to go with full gusto to do that, and you think that that maintaining some meat in your diet might tempt you to go back, go completely vegan. If you're like me and you're all or nothing, but you need to achieve that in a bit more of a gradual way, make that your goal. Say, this month I'm going to cut out beef. Next month I'm going to cut out pork. Month after that, poultry, and say within 5 months I want to have all animal products omitted from my diet. That is something well within most people's grasp. Like, a lot of people like to jump around and try to figure out how to replace every single thing that they might potentially miss. But it's like changing your wardrobe. Start with a couple of solid outfits and think about, how many outfits you really need. if you have a couple of solid choices that you can fall back on and use on a regular basis week after week for a while, it becomes really easy to feel good about the choice, as well as to feel full and like you're not sacrificing anything, that you're having tasty food that is nourishing and is better for you, better for the environment, better for the animals, better for other people in the world. And making the choice, I can speak to the fact that it's sustainable, and you're not giving anything up that in the long run you're going to miss.
I like to tell people to make a menu for themselves, for their house, and that way when they can invite over their friends and stuff, they can be like, here are the things I can make for you. You know, start a menu, start to add items to it, and develop your recipes. I think you gave some great advice, Kev.
Yeah, and thank you. One more thing, I guess, just to speak to that, making it more sustainable and putting a plan in place. Support groups are really helpful. If you can get the support of friends, because I think just about everybody these days knows someone who is vegan or vegetarian, get their help, solicit their help in terms of either ideas for recipes, tricks in cooking, tricks for preparing or keeping vegetables, and then do something like a potluck. Potlucks are really, really good because not only do you get the nourishing aspect and the idea aspect of food, but one of the big parts of food that is really important and a lot of people overlook is the communal aspect of it, the sharing food with other people, eating together, and that really serves to reinforce the idea that it's something that is a good choice, and it's something that you can keep doing and not mind. It's actually a really good thing, and over time your potluck group will build, and people will introduce you to new recipes, new ways of cooking, and new flavorful things that you never even imagined up until this point.
If you're not the kind of person who would feel comfortable doing that for yourself, I guarantee you there are local places where people are doing that already. If you can get involved in someone else's local vegetarian, vegan potluck, they definitely exist. I know where I live, there's a local Center for Peace, Justice, and Ecology called the Omni Center, and they have bi-weekly vegan vegetarian potlucks there. And it's just like you say, it's a community. They eat together, they share food and recipes of all different kinds, and they share stories about why they went veg and how it's important to them and all that kind of stuff. It's really great stuff, especially if you're just getting into it. It's great to have that support and that knowledge base there.
And as you're making the transition into veganism, there are going to be more fine-grained distinctions, like David was talking about earlier, with cutting different things out of your diet or buying vegan shoes, vegan belts. And there are certain things that you might not realize aren't vegan. I didn't know until probably about a year into being vegan that most wine isn't. It's either filtered with isinglass, which is sturgeon bladder. It's a giant, like, prehistoric-looking fish. They use that to pull the yeast out of certain wines in order to clarify it. They'll also use gelatin from cow hooves and cow bones.
Casein.
Egg. Albumin from egg whites. Casein from milk. So probably about 85-90% of wine isn't vegan. So there are plenty of really good choices for vegan wine, but you have to look them up.
If you get the red wine, yellowtails, those ones are vegan.
Yeah, yellowtail reds are vegan. They might have come around and made the white ones vegan. I don't know yet, but yeah, the reds are vegan. I like Stellar Organics. Their wine is really good. Frey, F-R-E-Y. Frey makes a lot of good wines, and they're all vegan. Our Daily Red, it's a good cheap red wine. You can get it for between $6.50 and $8 a bottle, and it's
Wait
a
second, that one sounds Christian.
No saviors were harmed in the making of this wine.
They turn it to Savior at the place by blessing it. They turn it into Jesus' blood, and I'm trying to get away from suffering. Come on, please. Quit trying to tempt me.
Like you were talking about with the animals sacrificing themselves, this is one of those few instances where he in fact did. You can drink this because there was a alleged self-sacrifice there. He did put the gun in his mouth, as it were. Most beer, however, is vegan. About 90%, 95% of beer is vegan, but some isn't. Some of the English cask-aged beers and some like additional, mostly foreign beers. There are about 5 that aren't vegan in normal stores. Red Stripe, Guinness, Foster's and Stella are vegan again, so that's good. I like them both pretty well. But yeah, so I'd steer clear of Red Stripe, Guinness, and there were a couple of other ones. But what I'm going to do is go and look on barnivore.com. Barnivore is this vegan wine, beer, and liquor site that has a list of all the beer, wine, and liquor, and that's going to be the best way that you can determine whether the thing that you're about to drink has used animal products. Additionally, if you're on the road and trying to find different vegan places or vegetarian places to eat, Happy Cow is going to be your best bet. I was in Costa Rica, and I used Happy Cow to find a number of vegan and vegetarian options there. But pretty much any city that I'm in that's strange, or even in my own city, if I'm looking for a place in an area that I don't know or for a certain type of food, I go to Happy Cow, look it up, and they've got a pretty extensive list.
That's right. If you're going to plan your trip, if you're going to be in some strange area, go there first, check out the options, and be excited about this cool new restaurant you're going to get to check out.
Yeah, look at it like it's an adventure, because it really is. It opened up whole new tastes and experiences to me, and I'm glad every day that I made the choice to switch. My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner.
Heard that, brother. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I would say, start with 1 or 2 days a week, maybe meatless Mondays or something like that. Practice. Get yourself some good meals under your belt, like Kevin is saying, and under your belt. Some good meals, that you know how to cook, that you're comfortable with, and expand on those. And this is really the beginning of starting to get into cooking too, which is really cool. Ladies love it when you cook for them, if you're a fellow, and if you're a gal, guys love it when you cook for them. We all love to have wonderful food made for us. And it's a great thing to give to your friends and family, and it feels like you're spreading the good word, and that's all good. Start, like he's saying, start slow, do it right. Health is not about what you don't eat. Health is about what you do eat. So make sure you get all the things that you need. You feel healthy, you exercise. Find new things. There's lots of good cheese substitutes, like Kevin was saying. You can make cashew cheese just with some cashews and some nutritional yeast and a little bit of water in the blender. It's pretty easy. You can get diet cheese, which is really good. It melts and stretches, and it's definitely doable. You could probably send Kevin or myself a message, and we would probably give you any kind of advice that we could about recipes or anything like that. Any final words, Kevin?
Thank you, interwebs, for listening. Tune in next time when we'll be talking about something completely different. Thanks for bearing with us and our eccentricities. Hope you enjoyed it, and have fun on your journey.
Peace, interwebs. Have a good night. It was wonderful spending time with you. Thanks for checking out Philosophical Conversations with Kevin and David. We'll see you next time.
Philosophical conversation with Kevin and David. Philosophical conversation. Philosophical conversations with Kevin and David. Philosophical conversation.